Hello, gentlemen. Today I want to talk to you about MGTOW, Male Mother Need, Pimping, and the Iceberg Slim book, Pimp, the Story of My Life. I've been starting to listen to the audio book of Pimp, the Story of My Life by Iceberg Slim, and it's really interesting what he has to say in the very beginning of that book. I'm maybe 2-3 chapters in right now, and it struck me that the very beginning of Iceberg Slim's life, he was raised by a woman who made bad decisions. He was raised by a woman, by his own account in Pimp, that had him with an irresponsible piece of shit nothing man who abused him. When he was a baby, according to Iceberg Slim, he was thrown against the wall by his father. She left him, left the town that he was born in, Chicago, and went somewhere else. And then going from a slick talking, handsome, I don't like the word Chad. I guess he would be a Tyrone, huh? But a slick talking Chad type of guy. And then settled down with basically a beta, successful man, God-fearing, owned his own business. But she hated him. She never loved him. And repeatedly in the beginning of that book, Iceberg Slim laments the fact that she left that man for another slick talking jive motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like, she left him for a hustler and the fast life. And Iceberg Slim has correctly identified that he needed the man that she was with. A man who loved him and that he loved, that adored his mother and treated her like a queen and loved her son, a child that wasn't his, a kind, gentle, loving man. And she left him and ran off with this, slick talking, exciting bad boy. It was the same type of man his father was. Then, in the early chapter, in chapter 1, maybe chapter 2, I don't remember, Iceberg talks about how his father came back into his life, and he had turned his life around. He went from a slick talking, hustler, who was abusive and mean, to a respectable businessman who had lots of money and turned his life around and wanted to, it seemed like from Iceberg's own words, from his own admission, that his father had turned his life around. And his mother, along with the man that she left with, I forgot his name, the gentleman that she was with, who was very successful in Rockford, Illinois. Only black business in the main strip of the town. Very successful. He elevated her status. He had his own status. He was successful. He had lots of money, was respected, didn't matter to her. She was looking for the type of slum street motherfucker that Iceberg's father was. But his father comes back a changed man years later. Came back and was trying to truly make amends to his wife and to his son. And what does this woman do? She fleeces Iceberg's father for every penny that he had. Stole all of his stuff, left him high and dry. I mean, vicious this woman was. Vicious. An absolute harpy. A harridan. Why am I talking to you about this? What does it have to do with MGTOW? Well, MGTOW brothers, this is what it has to do with MGTOW. Iceberg Slim, his life, his story, at least the beginning of his story, is racked with Barbarossa, the great sage of MGTOW. Great mind in the community, someone who I've listened to. I don't think anyone, including Stardust or Girl Rice, Karen Strong, I don't think anybody has topped the deep dive that he did into the male and female mind and sexuality and what makes us different and what makes us alike and why men are driven to women. Why do we submit to them? In one of his best videos, he talks about male mother need and how men are desperate for their mothers, for a feminine nurturing figure, someone who will truly care about them, someone who will love them irregardless of anything else, who will love them for who they are, not for what they do. And Iceberg never had that. His mother was the same type of whore that he would spend most of his life pimping. Iceberg came the man that he hated, the man that drove Iceberg's mother away from his adopted father, a man that he loved, a man who, when she left, cried, begged her to stay. Please, please stay. And she just looked at him with an icy glare and left. He became the man that he hated. The man that tried to drive him away from his mother. The man that beat a cat, a little kitty, a kitten against the wall till it died. He became that type of cruel, manipulative, cold person. That became him. You know, there's a scene early in the book after Iceberg had left his adopted father with his mother to Chicago and came back to Chicago after Iceberg's mother had told him about the fleecing of his real father, a man who he hated. And I find it funny that even though Iceberg's father had seemed, from Iceberg's own telling, to have turned his life around and wanted to make amends, he still carried a deep hatred in his heart for this man. And I don't blame him. If I was told that my father threw me against the wall when I was a baby, I would hate this man too. But he could never forgive his father. And he could never forget the man that drove his mother to leave, a good man. He could never forgive either one of them. A man who never turned a leaf, who, as far as Iceberg knows, never tried to reform himself. And the man that did, his own father, but he forgave his mother. In the beginning of that book, he repeatedly says, I can't blame her for what she did. It wasn't her fault, who I turned into. But yes, it was. He even talks about how his psychologist says that it's because of his hatred for his mother. What she did to him, what he put her through, what she allowed to happen to him, including being raped by a woman, is one of the only books I've ever read that talks about the abuse of young boys by older women. Something that is terrible and no one talks about. But Iceberg was molested. He was raped by a woman. Him being made helpless by his rapist. He talks about how he felt helpless, how he felt panicked, how he was afraid and confused, how he panicked at the hands of this older woman. How his mother, he had seen his mother drive a good man to his death, a man that he loved, a man who loved him, had watched his mother fleece and steal from his own father, a man who tried to make amends. Iceberg talks about how when his father had turned a new leaf and became successful and had lots of money and had all types of nice things in his home, and one day he came back and all his shit was just gone. And Iceberg knew what had happened, but he still, years after she had died, years after all this had happened, so some 40 years later, more than that, he still couldn't blame his mother for what happened. As ice cold as Iceberg Slim is, as cold as he was to them bitches, deep down, he was a simp. Like, he couldn't blame his mother for all what he had become. He still desperately wanted to be good for her when she had loved him. I mean, in the beginning of that book and all the things that she did, all the things that she put him through, being around abusive men, driving him away from a man that he loved and loved him and cared deeply for him, she didn't love him in the way that he needed to be loved. She didn't love him enough to let him be around a man that could teach him something good. It's sad that as cold as Iceberg Slim was, in the earliest time of his life, he just wanted to be loved by his mother and never was. Never really truly was loved by his mother. And how he couldn't blame her. He couldn't fault her for the things that she had did, for driving a good man to death, for having him around an abusive, cruel tyrant, from leaving him alone at a very, very influential age. He was 12, staying out to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. He couldn't blame her when it was her fault. Male Mother Need. I'm going to link the video by Barbarossa. Excellent video about male mother need. in the description if you haven't heard what the sage, the great MGTOW sage Barbarossa, had to say about male mother need and how men feel this deep yearning for maternal figures, and how MGTOW is a movement of modern men who are breaking their male mother need, their need for female attention and affection, their need for maternal love, because we know we're not going to get it. It's very rare to get. Most men don't even get it from their own mothers, and it drives them into dark places. So I want to talk about that, and I wanted to also say that if you look at serial killers, and Barbarossa does this, he talks about serial killers and how most serial killers were abused not by their fathers, but by their mothers. No, Charles Manson doesn't have a name. His name is N.O. Manson, no name Manson. She never named him. She never named him. That lots of serial killers would watch their mothers have sex with Johns, or their mothers were deadly abusive, and it drives them on a hatred towards women, and that hatred towards women drives these men to go out and kill women that remind them of their mother, because they can't kill their own mother. Not even demented, deranged serial killers who take life and enjoy it. Psychopaths will go out and kill women who remind them of their mothers, but not kill their mothers themselves. That's deep in it. That's real deep. So, anyone out there who hasn't read or listened to Iceberg Slim's book, Pimp, The Story of My Life, should give it a listen. It's a fascinating book about his journey to becoming a pimp. It will teach you some game, because I think that the game is still the same. You know, the game is no different from the 30s than it is today, that the last thing you want to do is let a bitch think you care. All the PUAs and game people out there, something I don't ascribe to, but I do understand it's effective. Understand that the last thing you can do is be beholden to a woman. That's the last thing that you should do, is do what Iceberg's adoptive father did, which is beg a woman to stay with him. Give them everything they want. Iceberg says that his adoptive father treated his mother like a princess, gave her everything she asked for, everything she ever could have wanted. She went from this horrible, abusive relationship with a man who tried to kill his own son to meeting a man who was everything any woman could have asked for: successful, social status, had everything going for him. Loved a child that wasn't even his. Iceberg was not his son, and yet he adopted this boy as his own and loved him as if it was his own flesh and blood, and she left him anyway. And I'll leave you with this little anecdote that Iceberg says. He says that he wishes that when his mother left from Rockford, Illinois, to travel to Chicago with a huckster, that he wishes she would have left him with his adoptive father. And if he had have been left with that man, how different his life would have been. Because he was a smart man. He was very smart. Undeniably so. If he was given direction and male leadership, if he was mentored by a man who loved him and wanted the best for him, that type of male discipline and focus, Iceberg could have been anything. But because of the selfishness of his mother, because of her baser instincts, to instead of seeing the opportunities for her and her son with this man that she thought was ugly and boring, she left with someone who had nothing, was a thief and a huckster. I mean, this man loved this woman even to the point where he gave her the money for her own business. He opened up her business, and that business did well. He gave her the money to start a business, and the business was successful, making lots of money, and she threw it all away to follow some fucking chump. It says a lot about female nature, doesn't it? How she followed these bad boys to the detriment of her own life, to the detriment of her son's life, and turned him into a monster, into a man that was just abusive and tyrannical. And I think that Iceberg Slim pimped these women and treated them so badly as a sick form of revenge, because he had been mistreated by his own mother, watched and saw how his mother was duplicitous and conniving and untrue, how she didn't love anyone who loved her, including himself. And he had been molested by a woman who used him like a thing and made him afraid, made him feel powerless. And Iceberg doesn't say this in his book, but it's heavily implied through his own writing that he wanted to be in a position where he would never be put in that position ever again. Never again would he be put in a position to be made to feel powerless by a woman, to be made to feel less than, to be made to feel like a thing, to be abused like he was by his mother and his rapist. And to do that, he became a pimp. He said, hey, look, bitches, you're not gonna do to me what I've seen happen to men, good men and bad. I'm gonna do what you did. You know, Iceberg says that a pimp is like a whore that reverses the game. A pimp is just a John who reverses the game. He is a whore. He's a male whore. He's a whore that's reversed the game. Instead of him giving her money, he is going to take control. He's going to take the power away from women. He's going to take their power away and be on top. So, more to come, gentlemen. I just wanted to share that because I think it's deep. Like I said, I'm going to link Barbarossa's video about male mother need in the low bar. And also, you can listen to Iceberg Slim's biography, his memoir, Pimp. You search for it on YouTube. It's on YouTube. Or go out and buy it. It's on Amazon. You can get the audio book. It's well worth it. Very interesting insight into the world of the super Chad. A Chad who's so chatly that he's made these bitches give him money. Like, he's basically become a woman. And I think that's the way to do it if you're going to do something. That instead of giving them money, go, no, bitch, you give me money. And it works. Make them earn something. Make them earn your respect. No, make them be worth something if you're going to be around me. That's all a pimp does. Signing off, gentlemen. Around me. That's all a pimp does.